Oi oi, it's your boy Jack Slack. It's Thursday night. The missus has retreated to bed. It's time to record a podcast because otherwise we're not going to get it out before this McGregor Poirier fight. So kettle's on. I'll be back in a second with my cup of tea and let's dig into this rather informally. So here we are. Poirier versus McGregor 2, 5 years in the making. Hasn't that flown by? Which is even weirder when you think that it's 8 years since the Max fight, as we mentioned the other day. But both at very different points in their career than the first time they met. They were both sort of up-and-comers. Holloway was probably the stiffest test of McGregor up to that point when they matched them, but everyone was sort of aware that they were two young upstarts. But Dustin Poirier, I think, was his first top 10 opponent, and their careers have gone in very different but interesting ways since then. Obviously, Conor McGregor shot to the top, did the double title thing, which is a big deal if it's a big deal to you, but otherwise, I think we're all sick of double titles now. We'll talk about Mason Jones later, actually, if we've got time. But then he disappeared. He basically, I want to say ran a con with the Mayweather fight, but that does seem to be the thing. You get to a certain level of celebrity, and then you try and make this bizarre super fight like Logan Paul and Jake Paul are after now. It's not so much about, that's the ultimate goal of fighting anyway. You want to get the big payday or multiple, and if you can do it without ever having to box up until that point, more power to you. But then after that, obviously, didn't defend his lightweight title, came back, fought Habib, lost. Came back last January, fought Donald Cerrone in what was, even before the fight, most of us were like, this is a pretty tailor-made matchup here that they've given him. Donald Cerrone hates southpaws, hates pressure, hates straight hitters. And lo and behold, Conor McGregor comes out and blasts him with the left straight into oblivion. But Dustin Poirier, he was not nearly as impressive on the way up as Conor McGregor, but he has done marvellous things to turn himself around. And even just from that division alone, there's Poirier, Gaethje, Oliveira, Diego Ferreira, just all these guys who were at a point in their career where you'd be happy to say, yeah, I think we've seen what that guy can do now. He's not going to be a world beater. And then they just changed and now are even better. It's pretty incredible that you can do that in MMA. And that it's happening, at the top end of the deepest divisions. But really, like the first fight, it was very brief, and we got some interesting stuff out of it. It was nice to see Poirier using the occasional low kick. But really, it's sad that I don't have a copy of Notorious next to me to pull up the chapter and read it to you. But a lot of that fight was down to a simple opening that Dustin gave him, and McGregor just took advantage. Most of McGregor's work is pushing people back, flustering them on the back foot with body kicks and wheel kicks that don't normally land but do scare people, and the odd snappy left straight or left high kick, and getting them to lash out off the fence and drop away and throw the counter right hand. But the Poirier fight's one where he went forward, found his spot, went for it 3 times and knocked him out with this one punch that just found the opening. It was a long whipping left hook, because both Poirier and McGregor, neither of them has fought a lot of southpaws. It's quite interesting because you've got divisions like middleweight where everyone in the top 10 is a southpaw, or was for a while. Like Chris Weidman went about 6 years fighting one orthodox fighter and 8 southpaws. But for whatever reason, the top end of the lightweight division at the moment and the featherweight division, much of it, while these guys were coming up, was orthodox fighters. But Poirier, he used to do this thing where he would, from his guard, he would bring his lead hand up so that his hand's on top of his head and his lead elbow is high. And that was really good for stopping the left straight, but Conor McGregor immediately started swinging wide around the side. A blow you don't normally see him doing, but Poirier was giving such an obvious opening for it that he just threw it, I think 3 times, 4 times, but he landed it really well twice and knocked him out. And I'll say that you're unlikely to see that this time because it was such a specific counter to a specific guard that Poirier was showing. But more than that, Poirier has developed some defense in recent years. When we talk about Poirier's defense and his use of like shoulder rolls, the odd cross guard, using the top of the head, things like that, what he's done is that he's made himself trickier to hit clean. And it's not that he's made himself like Pernell Whitaker or something like that. He's not untouchable, but he has used. I think there's this big misconception that like to use the shoulder roll well, or, if you want to call it a Philly shell or a stonewall or whatever, they're distinct things normally. Like the Philly shell / stonewall tends to refer to specifically carrying the lead hand low in your stance in that sort of shoulder roll position. Shoulder rolls tend, even fighters who fight from like traditional boxing stances still use their shoulder, tuck their chin to their shoulder and use their shoulder to roll off blows. But there's this like misconception that you have to be elite to even start using those techniques. And really, I think in MMA, they've always been more valuable anyway, because you don't have big gloves to hide behind. It's always better to be down behind your shoulders, and the shoulder roll links closely with folding guards using your elbows to get down behind those. So this is stuff that people should have been doing for a long time. And Dustin Poirier, by playing around with it, it's not the most economical like shoulder rolling stuff you'll see. He takes himself out of position. Like if you watch his fight with Holloway, the second one, he rolls behind his lead shoulder and then he squares up with his lead hand still low and his left elbow guarding in front of his face. It's very strange. Like he goes bladed and then completely square with his lead hand still down, which is probably part of why Max said he's blocking weird. So it's not like, if you watch someone like Floyd Mayweather Jr., Floyd Mayweather Sr., James Toney, there's so many good shoulder rollers in the history of boxing. But if you watch one of those guys who goes from the lead hand low stance and they're just tiny movements to roll off the punches, and they stay in position to counterpunch. And Poirier, not so much with that. But what he has done is make himself difficult to hit clean and mitigated a lot of the danger. He doesn't counterpunch off it as much as you'd like, because one of the things that's great about the shoulder roll in boxing generally is that it's a great way to get in range when you can hit a guy. There's a lot of ways to know you're in range. Some people have to do it from their eyes, from depth perception. But another way is to like put your hand out and feel for the guy. When you see like a Robbie Lawler type or something like that with their hands out, feeling for the guy and then swinging bombs. But another way is that if they throw their right hand and it hits your shoulder, it was close enough to hit you, so they're close enough to hit back. So the shoulder roll is a great platform for counter offense, and you don't see as much of that from Poirier as you'd like. But, it's quite interesting because Poirier's been doing all this shoulder rolling stuff against orthodox fighters where the line of the shoulder roll is really more in front of their jab than their rear hand. The shoulder roll could well take away a lot of Conor McGregor's left straight just out in the open. The problems that Poirier's going to face are the left straight as a counter, because Poirier, when he closes the distance, still tends to do it face first. And it works the other way, because Poirier has done so well using that weird, fighting southpaw. He's added a nice southpaw jab. He's added a nice southpaw lead hook counter. He throws big left overhands. He throws the odd left straight. Throws a really nice left straight while stepping backwards that he was catching Eddie Alvarez with in both their fights. But one of his best weapons is the Poirier shift, which we talked about a few times now. We, check out the Filthy Casuals guide to Gavin Tucker, because he does the same thing. It's where he, from southpaw, throws his left hand and then doubles it up as he steps through. So it goes left straight, left jab, and then he throws a booming overhand right. And he catches orthodox fighters with that all the time. But if you're southpaw, the stance matchup's different. It's rather than stepping into like a closed guard situation, you're trying to step from a closed guard situation into an open guard situation. So all the lines are going to be different on that, and I'm quite intrigued to see how that works. Especially as once Poirier throws the left straight and then changes to a left jab, he really sticks his chin out there. Very intriguing stuff. But I think the thing that I was talking about originally was that, like, in the first fight, he gave McGregor an easy win. McGregor didn't counterfight him, he just sniped him, because Poirier, every time Conor McGregor came at him, he went to this same right hand high on the head guard to stop the left straight. And he was doing it against Eric Koch. Go back and watch those old fights with, American History X, Dustin, and you'll see that he like a lot of his defensive work is just, well, I'm going to this cover up now, and now it's my turn to swing. Whereas now he's a little bit more aware of what's coming back. If you watch that fight with Holloway especially, he'll swing, throw himself out of his stance, and he'll see the punch coming back from, your left hook coming back from Max, and he'll duck his head down so that Max punches him in the top of the head. He's a lot more aware on defense now, is what I think. Whereas McGregor has always been pretty aware on defense, because a lot of his game is like trying to convince the guy that he's going to overwhelm them until they come back, and then that's when he lands his really good counters. In terms of the matchup, we talked about like Poirier leaving his chin out on a plate when he advances. I think that's a big deal. One of the things from Poirier is that he's an incredibly powerful hitter, and he can back people up, but when he's put under pressure, he tends to go straight back. You even saw with Max, who's not a huge hitter, a respectable hitter certainly. Like I don't think that the accusations of being pillow-fisted are particularly fair, because he doesn't throw full power a lot of the time. But Dustin backed him up on straight lines. If you watch the fight with Khabib, whoever beats Khabib, unless they do it off their back, footwork is going to be a huge part of it, because you want to cut down the amount of time that you're against the cage. Anyone would much rather Khabib shooting at them out in the open, regardless of those nice takedowns he hit on Gaethje away from the fence. He's much better when he's just driven you onto the fence and then you're stuck there for half the round. But Poirier came out against Khabib. Khabib moved in on him like he was going to hit him, and Poirier just went straight back to the fence in a straight line. And it happened in like how many rounds did that go? Because it happened in all of them at the start, that is. So that's always a big issue, because so much of Conor McGregor's game is getting the guy to back up right from the start. I mean, he did it to Khabib. Khabib is a guy who, like, in that fight, he should have been like, well, you would have thought he'd be like, yes, I want the clinch. If we both walk forward at each other, I get the clinch. But in the first round, he tried to jumping knee, but like in that third round, which people argue was a McGregor win, I'm not sold on that particularly. But that was the one where he had him backing up towards he had Khabib backing up towards the fence, Khabib shooting towards the center. That was when Conor legitimately stopped a takedown without cheating. Most of them he's holding the shorts. The old Anderson Silva special. The greats do it. I think you're allowed to do it if you're Conor McGregor and you've seen Anderson Silva do it. But he stopped a legitimate takedown attempt with legitimate defense because he had Khabib flustered near the fence, shooting towards the center of the cage. And that's where he kills guys. Chad Mendes spent the whole fight against the fence. Diego Brandao, Eddie Alvarez moved in towards the fence. Eddie would come out swinging towards him, and he'd back off and let him fall short and crack him with a counter. So I think that, I think if Dustin Poirier comes out and isn't immediately backed up onto the fence, I'll have a lot more faith in him being able to win the fight. Just because, Conor McGregor putting you against the fence takes away your retreat, and then he's going to pick at you until you swing at him. And Dustin Poirier, when you watch him come off the fence against like Holloway, it is just lead with the chin, double left hand, throw the overhand from the opposite stance or whatever. But he comes out swinging, and he tends to lead with his face. There was a really interesting fight that Poirier had not that long after the McGregor. Well, I suppose a little way. He'd moved up to lightweight, but he fought Joe Duffy, who obviously has a shared history with Conor McGregor. But Joe Duffy, very, very slick hands, very slick boxer. Had a really rough run of luck in recent years. He's a guy whose record does not reflect how hard a fight he is for a lot of his opponents, or should be. How difficult an opponent he is. I think he's left the UFC now, but like if you offered him to my young fighter, I'd be like, maybe don't, especially if he's on a losing streak, because then you'll just look even worse if you lose. But what he was doing was dropping away, letting Dustin Poirier come in, lead with his face, and cracking him with beautiful counters. If you go back and watch the first round of that fight, Joe Duffy puts on a boxing clinic. And then Poirier pulls himself back into the fight, firstly by like takedowns and things, shooting short takedowns along the fence. Actually, interesting link there. Anthony Pettis is like the last real southpaw I can remember him fighting, and almost no striking in that fight. Dustin Poirier just decides to take him down and have a grappling match. But against Joe Duffy, he hits these short takedowns along the fence, but also he pulls himself back into striking by, he'll eat a punch or whatever, but then he'll grab a collar tie and start hammering hockey punches in. And, it's not pretty, but it is effective because, why do people go to it in fights? Because aiming punches on people who are moving around is hard. Aiming at your own hand when you can feel where the opponent is pretty easy. You're just punching to your own hand. And you take away all that finesse, all the footwork and head movement that Duffy had. All the counters meant nothing because Poirier was holding on to him and hammering him. So I'd be intrigued to see if he could use the clinch at all against Conor McGregor. Obviously, like lunging for collar tie is not great, but if he could push McGregor to the fence, perhaps initiate like a single leg or something, hop him to the fence, like Diaz did several times, just pushed him to the fence, and then Diaz would use his head to create the head pin, free his arms, and start banging the body and head. And I think that I think that's a good shout for anyone against McGregor, to be honest, because you want to be able to hit him, you want to be able to get to his body, especially because of his conditioning issues in the past, and he doesn't take a body shot awfully well. But you want to take away his ability to counterpunch you, which is his entire thing. So one, pushing back to the fence because that takes away his retreat, and a lot of his best counters are like fading away. 2, push him up out of his stance because that's where he gets all his power from his feet. And if you pin him to the fence with your head, you can make it very hard for him to hit back while you're still hitting fairly effectively. That second Diaz fight, first, well, he did it in both actually, but the second Diaz fight especially, really a great example of that. But Poirier, kind of underrated on offense as a grappler, like that Pettis fight is a great example. Took down Justin Gaethje, but then, to be honest, a lot of people who've tried to take Justin Gaethje down have taken him down, and then he's exploded up and come up more tired. Both Poirier and Alvarez did that to him, took him down. He exploded up with like a butterfly sweep into standing position with the underhook, and then he was just gassed out afterwards. The Gaethje fight's actually a great example of Poirier's jab in action, and the jab, obviously, a lot more useful if you're a southpaw against another southpaw. You don't get that opportunity to have that normal closed guard jabbing matchup a lot if you're a southpaw. But we've always liked low kicks against McGregor. He tends to be pretty good at checking inside low kicks because his lead foot is toed in a lot of the time. But Poirier, being a southpaw, matches him up with the low kick on the outside of the lead leg. Obviously, don't just shoot for it naked and end up missing and then the guy comes back at you. You had to close the distance a little bit. Double hand fighting, probably a good idea for Poirier if he wants to kick. Just take away both of McGregor's hands with open palms, or complicate the path of them. But there were some really nice body kicks in the Alvarez fight, and sadly, that's something that's taken away by the closed guard matchup. Being against a southpaw, I really like body kicking against McGregor because he doesn't benefit too much from taking you down generally. If he grabs your leg while you're body kicking, and he doesn't like body shots. So and of course, the other brilliant thing about body kicks is that they tend to get the guy keeping his elbows at home, and you can't punch people in the head with like nice left straights if you're keeping your elbow tucked to your side. So the more you can get a guy thinking about the body kick, the more you can take him out of the frame of mind where he's punching you or throwing nice straights at you. But even when you consider like the grappling stuff, I mean, Conor McGregor, pretty good at stopping takedowns generally, fought 2 really good wrestlers ever, and Chad Mendes on short notice got taken down a lot but got up a lot. Habib, didn't, obviously, like anytime you talk about this Habib fight, you stir up emotions in people because they either hate one or the other. But I don't think he embarrassed himself in terms of like what he was trying to do in the Habib fight. Honestly, Dustin Poirier had similar results between the two of them, and Dustin Poirier trains at a gym with awesome wall walking. But he's all trying to keep one hand, fight 2 hands on one, stop him locking his hands around you, and you could see what they were both trying to do, and McGregor was doing all right with it. It's that thing we were always talking about with Habib, or were before he retired. A lot of guys are able to get up, but are then stuck on the fence. It's the breaking away part, because if he can keep you on the fence, he can keep cycling through the takedowns, and you're not winning a second of that round. But returning to Poirier, the thing about him as a grappler is that a lot of his best work has been things like Darcy's work from the front headlock, and that's when other people are taking you down or trying to take you down, generally. Unless you hit a snap down, but then not a lot of people hitting snap downs in MMA except Tony Ferguson and Brian Ortega. It's intriguing. I'd really like to see Dustin Poirier dirty boxing in this fight, if I'm honest. If closing, getting underhook, working, short uppercuts, changing off to the collar tie, pushing to the fence, that sort of stuff I think would be great. Kicking the legs out of range. Honestly, I think the one thing that I wouldn't want to see Dustin Poirier doing is that sort of leading with his face stuff. If he stands back, tries to stay safe behind the shoulder roll, plays a double hand checking guard, but trying to stay safe behind his shoulder roll, coming back with short counters. The short counter right hook he caught Max Holloway with a dozen times. There's backstepping left straight he caught Eddie Alvarez with a load. Flicking at his jab, which is actually surprisingly good. Watch the Jim Miller fight, watch the Alvarez fight. Watch the Holloway fight. Who out-jabs Max Holloway? Maybe Volkanovski in a couple of rounds. But that's the duality of Dustin. He's added all this neat, like, more technically sound stuff. But he throws, it's like an 80-20 thing where he gets 80% of his results from the 20% of daft stuff he does, the leading with his face, shifting through. And, you have to take the thing as a whole. That's the stuff that works for him because he's got all this more orthodox stuff now. Whereas back in the day, like you watch the Yancy Medeiros fight, it's just running in with shifts over and over again. And the same thing with like Michael Johnson, another southpaw he fought who slid back and sparked him. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. I'm going to keep sipping this tea, but whatever happens in that fight, I think that's fascinating. It's weird with the Khabib situation because he basically did the honey dicking thing where he was just like, yeah, I might come back, see how it goes. He was pretty cool about Charles Oliveira. I think this is the thing, like, when you do that, it's kind of shit. I'll see how it goes and I might come back. It's kind of shit because basically if you don't come back, it's like, yeah, well, I didn't think the guy was good enough to challenge me, when really, that should be the opposite of what you're thinking. But he's very cool. He was very respectful about Charles Oliveira, and Charles Oliveira was really nice on Twitter about it. But I think that's an interesting fight. It's obviously a hard one to sell because morons will be like, well, Charles Oliveira has 7 losses or whatever it is, whereas Khabib has none. Why would you make that fight? But you've also got this co-main event coming up, which is Chandler versus Hooker. I mean, Hooker moving into the title picture like immediately off this fight, probably unlikely. Michael Chandler, it seems like they want to get him in the title picture or have him lose immediately. I'm not quite sure here because Dan Hooker is a lot sharper on the feet than a lot of the people Michael Chandler's fought. I think Patricio Pitbull is an awesome fighter, but a lot of his game is big counterpunches. And what he did was he timed Michael Chandler just lunging at him with a jab and shot right across the top. Which is something that he has to do because he's often the shorter fighter. Whereas Dan Hooker is a guy who will get behind the jab, get behind the low kick, and just beat you up for rounds. And I think that could work I think that could be really hard for Michael Chandler, especially when you consider that Brent Primus fight where his leg went to sleep. But actually, I think he did suffer like a broken ankle in that. I don't want to shit talk him too much because I have made fun of Michael Chandler so much over the years, but I am genuinely intrigued to see how he fits in against top class guys. Honestly, I thought Will Brooks was going to fare far better in the UFC than he did. And even watching him lose, I was like, yeah, but he showed some sharp stuff. Like the Ross Pearson fight. Maybe it's because he beat Ross Pearson, and I immediately think that everyone who beats Ross Pearson must be the best because Ross Pearson's the best. But he was throwing like a step up inside low kick off his lead leg, stepping back, and then trying to time a counter knee as Ross came in. And then throwing a left body kick from southpaw instead if Ross stayed back in his stance. Doing lots of cool stuff like that. But I think the thing that annoys me about Chandler is the sort of hype stuff where he's like portrayed to be this unstoppable force who was on top in Bellator for years and years and years. And this is always the thing, like people go, yeah, I mean, Bellator's shit, but Michael Chandler is a real standout. And then you realise that Michael Chandler's like 6-5 in Bellator title fights. He's lost the title almost more times than he's won it. But, it's not like there was really that divide between him and the division. And a lot of the ones that he wins, it kind of seemed like the guy that he was fighting wasn't that special because, Patricky Pitbull is not great compared to Patricio Pitbull. But the ones like the Brent Primus rematch and the Goto Yamauchi fight, he comes out, he swings these big bombs, and he's not got the most technical striking in the world. He just wings big right hands. But then when he gets tired, he takes the guy down in the fence and he just sort of lays in closed guard, which is really disappointing because he's a Neil Melanson student. So I'm watching it going, oh, please hit a cradle, do something cool. But he kind of uses the takedowns to just catch a breather. And with guys like Goto Yamauchi, who was like hyped up as this guard playing machine, but Michael Chandler moved into the fence and he was like, oh, I don't know how to wall walk. So, yeah, it's kind of weird because I don't really know how to place him because I've only seen him against those type of guys who don't seem to have the quality of skills in those sort of positions. Dan Hooker, I don't know if he's a great wall walker, but honestly, I don't know if he's that great from the bottom. Haven't seen an awful lot of it in action. But he is very good at keeping his distance and he is very good at lighting people up with jabs and low kicks and hooking off the jab. But equally, he's the kind of guy who will offer Michael Chandler a brawl if he wants one, and then, you get to see the Michael Chandler power. Looking down the rest of this card, though, this card's pretty strange. And it comes with, I believe they're raising the price for this one, or they are in America at least. I'm in the UK, so it's either like BT Sports or sometimes you can get them on Fight Pass. But the way it's going at the moment is like Dana White's announced that he's going to be like catching a streamer, Chris Hansen style, coming and be like, well, why don't you take a seat? Because it's fucking illegal. But, he's threatening to catch every streamer in America or whatever. And, this has been my job for a while. So I pay for events, I have that moral obligation. It is, it's quite a lot of money over the year if you pay for all the pay-per-views. And if you've got a subscription to your Fight Pass and whatever, in fairness, at least the UFC, you can get all their events now, because there have been Bellator cards where if you're in the UK, and they've had like UK fighters on, and you've had to like wait for them to be uploaded to YouTube by someone moments after, because there's no way to get it in the UK. Or Rising. I mean, that one, it's like they don't. Well, a couple of their events, it was like they wanted people to illegally stream them in other countries. But I think the way that they're going about this is very strange. They've bumped up the price. They've not put an awful lot of big names on the card. You've got Jessica Ai on the main card. She's the third fight, as in like from the top. Brad Tavares versus Shoeface. That's an interesting enough fight, but that's like a fight night fight to me. It kind of ties in with like how just they don't understand how to use Conor McGregor cards. You got that Jessica Ai Joanne Calderwood fight, which I suppose you could say, yes, that's to draw attention to who's fighting Valentina next. But Jessica Ai, to be honest, I can see JoJo losing this one because she tends to lose in big fights. But Jessica Ai is not going to put on an entertaining fight, or probably not. 95% sure she's not. If you want to get eyes on Valentina, have a Valentina fight on the card. It's like they never understand how to use these Conor McGregor events to get people talking about other divisions, or when he was champion about the same division. I mean, at least you got Dan Hooker and Michael Chandler on this card, but there's just baffling matchmaking here. And then Dana's going on about like how he's going to catch a streamer or someone who puts up streams. But it's a baffling approach to take towards this stuff. I mean, like, firstly, if you make content, it's going to get pirated in the modern world. Like, I wrote a book about Conor McGregor, and I'm pretty sure you can find that online. It's just something that you have to accept. But what you're doing in, like, just threatening people and being like, oh, I'm going to catch streamers. Firstly, people who stream regularly are going to laugh at you because, I don't think there is a way you can catch someone just watching a stream. I presume they're trying to catch someone who posts streams. But there are a lot of people who want to remain fans of this sport and are broke. This is like a $90 pay-per-view now in American money. And you still want those people watching your cards and sharing it with friends and saying, hey, I watched the UFC this weekend. It was amazing. And then the other people who are streaming it are people who are saying, like, I would not pay that anyway. They're scoffing at the price point for a card full of things like Jessica Ai and Matt Frivola and Amanda Rebus on the main card of a pay-per-view. I know it's not divided up this way, but like if you look at the main card and you go, well, what portion of my $90 is that fight worth? Aside from the top two, you're going, what? But the way to do this stuff, and like the WWE, they have been losing TV ratings for years. Their TV ratings are in the shitter, and they keep making more and more money because they've taken all their content and put it on one service. Because if you make things easily accessible and you give the price up front, people are willing to pay that. Like if you made Fight Pass 30, 40, 50, if you made Fight Pass the price of the pay-per-view for the month with like $5 extra, most people who could afford it would be like, yeah, fine, whatever. I can watch it all in one place. You got all the fights from like Shuto and stuff there too. Cool. It's one, making things difficult to get to. Two, keep jacking up the prices and not like justifying it with the card. And then, the answer to that is not really threatening people. It should be like, we're going to offer you more and here's how you can watch all the fights. And it's a really strange stance to take, especially when you consider like NBA, NFL, all the big leagues have absolutely failed in combating piracy. It's going to happen. You just want to make it easier for people to not do. If you ask for a reasonable amount of money and you make it very, very easy to watch it legally, most people will not go through sketchy sites and have to like click through hundreds of pop-ups which might infect their computer with malware. They'll watch your service for, $30 a month or whatever. So absolutely baffling, that one. But what is good on this card? I mean, Jessica Ai versus JoJo Calderwood, I've already said I can see JoJo losing that one because she's got all the skills except like pop in her blows, and she tends to just like, she'll have a good win and you'll go, damn, JoJo's improved, and then she'll lose one immediately afterwards. You got Otman Azata versus Matt Frivola. I mean, Otman Azata is pretty fun. He's undefeated prospect. Matt Frivola is pretty good, actually. I didn't mean to shit on him when I was saying, like, the quality of this card. Amanda Rebus is back, and she's supposed to be hot shit. Oh, here's a good one. There we go. Arman Sarukian versus Nasrat Haqparast. That is a banger. Nasrat Haqparast, great pressure fighter, good on the front foot. Halal Kelvin Gastelum, they call him. And Arman Sarukian, just a wild man. Got crazy Russian wrestling skills, but also weird high-kicking lead leg karate stuff. You got Khalil Roundtree fighting someone that I've never seen before. And you got Nick Lentz versus Moisar Evloev. Oh, Evloev, I like Evloev. Dude's got some fun swingy hands and like the longest body and shortest arms you've ever seen. That's about it for that card. Brad Tavares versus Shufe should be fun too, because Brad Tavares stops a good takedown. He had like an 89% takedown defense percentage a few years ago. And Shufe, while he's like a monster on the ground, he's had issues when guys can stop him from getting them there, stop him from getting them there. Ian Heinisch, I love Ian Heinisch mainly because I don't care about watching Ian Heinisch strike. I like watching Ian Heinisch be taken down and then stand up and Granby. He's got the most fun anti-wrestling possibly of anyone. But anyway, I just wanted to get through that because we're getting towards fight time and I thought I'd better get something up because of my weird recording timetable at the moment. So I'll cut it off there and we'll talk about some more interesting stuff next week. If you've not read the Max Holloway versus Calvin Kattar Awestruck post-fight breakdown, you can get that by becoming a Patreon boy, support the podcast, read all the articles and listen to all the history episodes that I put out for Patreon boys. If you want to send an email to the podcast, jackslackpodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to see what I'm writing anytime, fightprimer.com. I'm your boy Jack Slack. Connor bless.